Yo, what's up, man?
What's up? How you doing?
How you doing, dude? Did you see that Colonel Berry on Facebook?
No.
Oh man, there's some dude, there's some person on Facebook that say the wrong shit on somebody's page, and people just burying her.
Oh man, tell me
You
about
do
it
this,
later.
the shit that's coming. You're gonna laugh later. So here we got the Rock Show 65, the making of things must pass. Pretty incredible album.
Yeah, George Harrison's "All Things Must Pass." It was the first real solo effort by him.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't understand that because they say it's his third studio
well,
album, but it was like,
yeah, he had two releases while the Beatles was still around in '69. One was like a compilation thing called Wonderwall, and then one was like an experimental kind of album that he didn't even recognize those two as
wow.
being solo records of his.
Yeah, because
So
he was playing with other people too. Like if you see
oh
some
yeah,
of the people he was playing, but
oh yeah,
holy shit, man.
yeah. I mean, this was like a who's who of rock stars, man.
Yeah,
Basically,
man, that's what I was
playing.
saying. This album had a little bit of everybody in it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and actually, some bands actually came out of the sessions.
Oh
You'll see,
yeah.
you'll see that. Um,
Did Kato Caitlin come out of any of these bands?
Kato Kalin, yeah. I mean, like with Rodney, he's everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, but there's a great quote about this album that George Harrison had himself, and I'll start with that. It says, "I didn't have many tunes on Beatles records, so doing an album like All Things Must Pass was like going to the bathroom and letting it all out."
Yeah.
You know, and it was. A lot of this material he'd had for a couple of years already, and they were songs that were rejected by Paul McCartney and John Lennon. That they felt they weren't good enough for Beatles records. But the truth is that you look at that time period between like 66 and when the band broke up in 70.
Yeah.
I mean, they made some amazing music, but within that amazing music, there's some clunkers. There's some shit songs.
Dude, do you
Okay.
read? There was an article somebody that because since they broke up in April, some people actually thought it was an April Fool's joke.
Yeah, that's true. Nobody believed it when it came out.
Nobody believed it, and it came out. They broke up pretty much like in April, and people thought it was a joke.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody believed it for like a few days, and then they had to actually say it that it was true.
So this is actually episode 65 of the Rock Show. All Things Must Pass. This album was released November 27, 1970. 1970.
Yep.
It was a double LP, and it was 106 minutes long.
Triple LP, my friend.
Triple LP, all right.
Yeah, very first triple LP in rock music.
Was it a I thought the vinyl did. Was it a triple LP or was when it came out on DVD a triple LP?
No, it originally was 3 LPs in a box.
Wow.
Okay, you had the two albums, the two LPs that were the album.
Yes,
and
the album.
The third thing was called Apple Jam, and it was just like 5 songs, long jams. One song had vocals, everything else was instrumental.
Yeah.
A lot of people kind of skipped that part of the record, but I've kind of learned to enjoy it over the years. There's some interesting guitar work on there.
Yeah, the Apple Jam is actually pretty good. That's something that he worked on, and he got people and stuff there.
Yeah, I mean everybody's on that, and well, we're going to talk about that. But you said it right. It was released November 27th, 1970. It was recorded from May to October of that year in Abbey Road Studios, Trident Studios, and Apple Studios.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it was co-produced between Harrison and Phil Spector.
Dude, what is it with this guy? Whatever he touches goes to gold.
Especially at that time of his life, really. Like
in
the 60s and 70s, early 70s, yeah. I mean, he had already worked with the Beatles a little bit on like what was called the Get Back sessions, and that was really what would become Let It Be.
Let It Be? All right.
Yeah, and, he was involved with the production of that. That didn't go well. There's a whole story with that about how there was so much infighting. They actually recorded Let It Be before Abbey Road.
Wow.
And it didn't come out until after.
Wow, I
Okay.
didn't know. Let me
Yeah.
ask you a question. What made this guy so good? Why is I think we gotta have like a total whole episode on this guy's career.
Yeah, we could. We could. It'd be very interesting. Might even have to be two parts because he really, especially in the '60s, early '60s, he was like the epitome of pop music, what it was supposed to sound like. You know, that whole wall of feature that he
Yeah, that
had.
was
You
incredible. The
know,
war
and
sound.
yeah, yeah, and it works really great with this album. I think. You know, when it got to the recording of it, he was using, you know, 5 rhythm guitarists, 3 drummers, you know, full orchestras to get this sound. And it works on the songs pretty
He
good.
also started
Uh,
playing that weird Indian instrument. You know the name of that instrument?
a
The
sitar?
sitar. That's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Harrison had been playing that since around 65,
Yeah,
66. Okay. And he had gotten really good at it. And it was in many, many Beatles songs in that
yeah,
time. Um, But actually, with this album, he kind of put it down a little bit. He started writing from guitar again, from a guitar
yeah.
point
Didn't
of
he
view.
like started using like the slide guitar or something? Using the slide guitar.
Yeah, the slide guitar is something that he would be known for, you know, in his career, and he really brought it out in this for the first
Yep.
time. But you know, the beginnings of this album actually start when George Harrison visited Bob Dylan in America, and that was right after the Beatles had recorded the White Album in
Yep.
'68. Now, he enjoyed working with Bob Dylan and the band, you know, Dylan and the band. That was the backing
Yeah, they
band.
had chemistry.
Um, yeah, he felt that he was treated like an equal. And he didn't have that kind of relationship with the Beatles anymore. Everything was, you know, Lennon and McCartney songwriting, okay? He would be allowed to put, you know, maybe 1 or 2 compositions on an album at the
Yeah.
most, okay? Maybe sing one, something like that. But he had brought a lot of music to them, and they just, you know, they didn't take him that seriously. And he felt that playing with Dylan, he was more of an equal, and Bob, you know, listened to him and you know, let him have a lot of input. And during the visit with Dylan that he had in '68, he started writing songs again from the guitar point of view as opposed to using the sitar. And because for the last like 3 years, that's really how he wrote. But it was the beginning of a very creative period for George Harrison. Now, he collaborated with Dylan, but he also collaborated with Eric Clapton, and he had become very good friends with him. Now, going into 1969, he produced on Apple Records Billy Preston's solo album and a woman named Doris Troy. They were 2 soul influenced American singer songwriters, and they would prove very influential on All Things Must Pass. He toured briefly with Eric Clapton and kept spiritual as he was still involved with the Hare Krishna and Hindu movement that he had
Yeah.
gotten into. And he stuck with that his whole life. Now, you know, the band had gotten into that, but he was the only one that stayed
Yeah.
with it. Now, in '69, between '69 and '70, he produced 2 hit singles for a UK-based group called the Radha Krishna Temple. Okay, these were actually top 10 hits by this group. And in January of '70, Harrison invited Phil Spector to the recordings of John Lennon's Plastic Ono band, the single Instant Karma. Okay, when that was, I think it was being recorded, I think at either Abbey Road or Apple, and he invited him down to the sessions for them recording that song. Um, this like meeting led to Phil Spector being brought in to co-produce All Things Must Pass, which kind of like the following month, Harrison would go into Abbey Road Studios and start recording some demos.
Okay.
The, Now, the actual title track, All Things Must
Yeah.
Pass, was a song that he had given to the Beatles, and they
Yeah, they
rejected it.
passed. Yeah.
They passed on it, right?
Let
So
me ask you a
he
question.
decided to.
So Mike, after the Beatles broke up, so Harrison, George Harrison was playing music and stuff, but he was also producing some acts, right?
Right. Well, I just said he produced that Hare
Yeah.
Krishna act, and he was involved with producing Billy Preston's
Yeah.
album. Preston would play with him on All Things Must Pass.
Why you think he
Yeah,
did?
he was very. I
Why
mean,
did he do that? Why didn't he just put a band together and started playing? He needed like the break from the. He just needed to walk away from a bit and just help other people out. What was that about?
yeah. Well, you know what? There was a period in '69, early '69, I think January, where he actually left the
Yeah.
Beatles. He
Okay.
quit. Okay. But it was very brief, and because at that time between '69 and '70, the band was fighting a lot. Okay. It was a period where it was obvious they were going in different directions. Yoko Ono was in the middle of that. You could make whatever you want out of that. But Harrison was always kind of to the side. He was the quiet Beatle. And he was my favorite Beatle, to be honest with you. I think that, when I was young, it was always John Lennon. But as I got older, and I appreciated the Beatles, George became
Yeah,
my
George.
favorite.
And Phil had a weird respect for him. Like he
Oh, he
heard
did.
his collection. Like he had hundreds of fucking songs. Like he had built in that he let all his emotion, and we just got a small like tasting of what he really was.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, Spector actually, when he was visiting during those sessions for John Lennon's Plastic Ono band, Spector was hanging out with Harrison, and he went to go stay with him at Friar
Yeah.
Park, which was Harrison's residence. It's a 120 room Victorian mansion, okay, that he had just bought at that time, and it was known for caves and an underground river underneath the house, okay. And Harrison brought him there. It was originally owned by a guy named, it was a lawyer named Sir Frank
Yeah.
Crisp. Now, remember that name because it actually comes into play on the album.
Okay.
Spector was like amazed at the amount of unreleased songs that Harrison had at this point. Like you just said,
Yeah.
the song "Isn't It a
Yep.
Pity," "The Art of Dying," both of those go back to 1966. The song "I'd Have You Anytime," he actually co-wrote that with Bob Dylan. A song called
I
"Let It
was just going to
Down."
ask you that because
Wrote,
that was something he wrote with Dylan for Woodstock, right?
right, for Woodstock. And in '68, that was written. Those two songs, "Let It Down" and the one with Dylan, "I'd Have You
Yeah.
Anytime." But the track "Hear Me, Lord" and "Let It Down" were actually given to the Beatles as well, and they passed on them. Okay, so these were all these were songs he had lying around for a
Yeah.
while. "Wah Wah," which is one of my
Wow was
favorites on the
great.
album, was written like in January of '69, in that period when he left the Beatles briefly. "Run of the Mill" was written around the same time, and that's actually a song that's kind of like about the Beatles.
Yep.
Okay. "What Is Life?" That actually came to him when he was driving in his car going to Billy Preston's
Okay.
recording. Okay, when he was working on that. The album that Billy was working on ended up being called "That's the Way God Planned It," and it was fully produced by
Wow.
Harrison. But there was a song called "Behind That Locked Door" that was written with Bob Dylan in mind. It was kind of written for him. "My Sweet Lord," that was an attempt at George making a gospel song. Okay,
That's a fucking great song.
it is. It is. I always loved that song from when I was a kid. "I Dig Love" is another one that featured Harrison's early experimenting with the slide
Yep.
guitar, and that's was one of the first times you heard him use that, and he would use that continuously for the rest of his life, a slide guitar. In early '70, he wrote the song "Awaiting on You," and he wrote "Beware of Darkness," and then the ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp, which is the guy he bought the house from. Okay. That was the original Friar Park owner. He was like a crazy lawyer. Um, May 1st of 1970, right before the recordings for All Things Must Pass began, Harrison went to go visit Bob Dylan again, this time in New
Yep.
York. And he acquired a new song from him called "If Not For You." And then also he wrote the song "Apple
Yeah. Apple
Scruffs."
Scrub is another good song. Yep.
Great stuff. Great stuff. You know, the way I think of All Things Must Pass is kind of like it's a musical stew. It's a musical stew of influences, like everything from hard rock to country to Motown the slide guitar, the Harry Krishna
Yeah.
chants, the Indian classical music thrown in there. And the lyrics are like incredibly personal. And it's almost like he's having like a spiritual
Oh, he
journey
totally
through
is.
the
I
whole
call
album.
it like it's like the fruit cocktail of albums. A little bit of everything.
Yeah, well, there's another good analogy, okay? Because it's so damn long,
Yes,
the
very
album.
long.
All right, right. It's often called the War and Peace
Oh,
of
it
rock
totally is the
records.
one piece of rock.
All right, but it's something that everybody should dive into at least once and check it out because it's really like it's the best as far as I'm concerned solo effort by any Beatle. I think it
Dude,
is.
let me tell you, this guy was a hell of a songwriter. And think about it, you had Paul and you had John with that, but this guy, holy shit! You know how much they must have been holding him back, and for him to release his own shit, he was like probably like motherfuckers.
And if you think about it, what if like they let him put a few more songs on there, and then you didn't have crap like "When I'm 64" on Sergeant Pepper, and you had
It is a good song, but it did not belong with Sergeant Pepper.
it. Nah, the Beatles are great, and they're tops, man, one of the best. You can't argue that. But at the same time, they got a few songs that you go like,
You mean
"What
the
the fuck?"
Backstreet Boys of the
Okay,
'60s?
yeah, definitely. They just got a little too full of themselves. Like, isn't Hey Jude about 5 minutes too
Yeah,
long? You know, I mean, if some of those songs that were on All Things Must Pass actually went on a Beatles record, that would be, that record would be a lot
yeah,
better. Whatever it was. I mean, the last two Beatles records, Abbey Road and Let It Be, to me, they could have been just one great
yeah.
album because there's a lot of filler in those two. Okay, and they should have let Harrison produce a little more or let him write a little more. You know, but what are you gonna do? Can't change
Nah,
history. But
but think about it.
now,
You put some of these songs in Sergeant Pepper. Holy shit!
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and I love Sergeant Pepper, but there's a few songs on there you go, oh
Yeah,
man, what is, you know, like even on the White Album, like you could have took off Revolution Number 9. That's a
yeah,
stupid song. The one that goes
yeah.
number 9,
Uh,
number 9, number 9, number 9. What is that? But all right. Now this was a double album. We all
yep,
know that. Okay. But the third album was called
yep.
Apple Jam. All right. And that was the third record of the set. Now, 5 tracks are on that. 4 of them are instrumentals. You got songs called Out of the Blue, Plug Me In, Thanks for the Pepperoni, and I Remember Jeep. Now, Jeep was Eric Clapton's dog. That was the name of Eric Clapton's dog. And the one track that actually had vocals was called It's Johnny's Birthday. And it's kind of like a party song, like there's singing it around a birthday party
Yeah,
type thing. Um, the interesting thing about All Things Must Pass is that there's probably about 24 other songs that have never been released. Okay, they're sitting in a can somewhere. They've never been released. Uh, some stuff was bootlegged over the years that may have come out. A few things I probably haven't heard them, but as far as like the whole complete recording sessions of All Things Must Pass, it's
let
never
me
been
tell you, you know
released.
what that's gonna come out with? George Jr. needs some money, and it's time to let me release this shit.
Yeah, I don't know. Did he have a son,
Yeah, he had a
George
son. He
Harrison?
played with him in that thing in India. That thing that sponsor. What was it that they had? A big
Oh, the concert
from
for
Bangladesh. His
Bangladesh,
son played. And he also played with them. Remember, he was playing with Prince and Tom Petty and all those guys.
in Madison Square Garden that time.
He
His
looks
son was
just like
there.
George. He looks like a young George when he was with the
Yeah.
yeah. Check it out. Yeah, his son plays guitar
Okay.
too.
I forgot all about that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Um. I mean, I guess he's in charge of his musical uh catalog. But It's never been released. They should do that. They should come out with like a 6-volume set.
They
I'd check
did
it out.
come out. While he was still alive for the 30th anniversary. I think in 2001, he did come out with
Yeah, he was working on the remastering of
yeah.
it and stuff, but they really didn't come out with too many extra bonus
Nah.
tracks. Like I have the, like you were listening to the 28 track
Yeah.
set, right? Okay, now there's a couple of like different versions on there. There's like the 2000 version of My
Yep.
Sweet Lord, which was like a remixed kind of thing. It's the same song, but just slightly different mix. Different version of What
Yep.
Is Life, Beware Darkness, I Live for You, and Let It Down. But as far as like bonus tracks, different songs, I mean, they didn't come out with that, but they exist. They're out there. Now, the exact musical lineup for All Things Must Pass is kind of like a little unknown. They didn't exactly give credit to everybody that's on that album. Okay, for instance, Eric Clapton is
Yeah.
all over the album, especially the Apple Jam stuff. Okay, but he got no credit on that album, and there was a kind of a law among the BBC at that time that they couldn't credit him or something like that. Okay, so he remained uncredited up until I think that 2000 re-release that we were just talking about. Now, for three people that were on the album: Bobby Whitlock, Jim Gordon, and Carl Radle. They all would meet Eric Clapton during those sessions, and they would start a band called Derek and the Dominoes. Okay, and Derek and the Dominoes is the one-off thing that Clapton did that got
Yep.
Layla, the song Layla. So it's just amazing that out of the sessions of that, you get that amazing band that did that one amazing song that
Yeah.
everybody knows. Bobby Keys, the Stones sax player, he plays on this album. Also, like I said, Eric Clapton, Ringo Starr plays on
Yeah,
it briefly.
Ringo
Billy,
Starr. He was there too. Dude, this is like an
yeah,
all
right.
star. It's a who's a musician playing in this album.
Yeah, Billy Preston plays piano on keyboards. Manfred Mann's bass player named Klaus Vorman, he plays on it. On keyboards, also you had Gary Wright. Now you might remember the song
Yep.
Dreamweaver from the
Yep.
70s. That was Gary Wright. He plays on that album. Now there was a band that was signed to Apple that was beginning to get popular at the time called Badfinger. And they were brought in to work on the record too, to be session workers. And also, you had a very young pre-Genesis Phil
Yeah,
Collins
how
on
much,
it.
dude? Again, the who's like this is an amazing
Yep.
album. Like the people that worked on it, and when you look at like it doesn't even seem like that. And when you look at the credit, it doesn't even say. I think they had too many people to credit to.
A lot of people remained
Yeah.
uncredited for many years. Peter Frampton's on it. Ginger Baker is
Wow.
playing on it. Okay, on the Apple Jam record. And Procol Harum's Gary Brooker, okay, the singer, and he plays piano. He was on the album. Now there's rumors even that John Lennon and Maurice Gibb from the Bee Gees was
Wow.
on it. Okay, but that kind of like was no one really knew for sure if they actually played on it. Phil Spector began recording the album on May 26th. He started doing the background tracks live. Okay. And he was using, to get that wall of sound, he was using multiple drummers, multiple guitarists, multiple keyboardists, and, as many sometimes as 5 at a
Wow.
time to create that wall of sound. Now, the first song they worked on was called Wah
Wow
Wah,
was a great
right?
fucking song.
Right, right. And What Is Life they worked on, Isn't It a Pity, All Things Must Pass, and The Ballad of Sir Frankie
That's a
Chris.
great
And
song.
they basically were using, it is. And they were using, that wall of sound technique on this record. And, that's like the first few songs that they worked on. But originally, they had estimated it would take about 8 weeks to record this part of the album, or really the whole album. I think they predicted about 8 weeks, but it wasn't going to be like that because Harrison's mother got sick, and she lived back in Liverpool, and he had to constantly go back and forth to take care of her. And also, when you're dealing with Phil Spector, you're dealing with his
Yeah.
erraticness and his perfectionism, and that was a problem because he would have a million takes of everything. He was known for that. And Harrison complained that, Phil Spector, before he even got started, needed 18 cherry brandies before he before before he would even get started in the studio. You know how many fucking drinks that
That's
is?
a lot.
18 cherry brandy. Jesus,
Hey,
I
let
would have
me ask you a
puked.
question. What was this thing that I think George Harrison offered Ronnie Spector, Phil's wife, some songs, right?
Oh well, yeah. There was a period before they were recording this where he had recorded the song "Try Some, Buy
Yes.
Some," and he would. It was supposed to be written for Ronnie. She was trying to get the Ronettes back together. It never happened in the early
Okay.
'70s. Remember, we dealt with that a
Yeah.
little bit when we talked about the Ronettes. He actually would record that song himself, and eventually later on, she would put it out as a single. I actually
Oh
have the
yeah.
single at home. It's very yeah the Ronnie the Ronette version, Ronnie
How it
Spector
sound?
version of it. Uh,
Yeah.
it's great. It's great. It's a song about doing drugs. It's a song about getting fucked up and making a mistake kind of thing. know? Yeah, yeah, it's a good song. Um, now, Spectre was being
Yeah.
erratic as usual, so this kind of slowed things down. And sometimes it would, you'd have a situation where Harrison himself was really kind of just left at the controls. Okay, basically, Spectre might be a little too fucked up, and Harrison would take over in the production. So because of this, the studio costs started to mount a little bit, and the record company was getting a little concerned, but they kind of let it go the way it had to go. The other problem that was happening at this time is that Eric Clapton was falling in love with George Harrison's wife, Patty Boyd. Okay, now this is a famous story. I don't know if you've ever heard this, where years later Clapton would steal
Yeah. They
her
had.
wig.
Yeah, I heard this whole story about Clap. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But this was in the beginnings of that, when he was having these feelings for his best friend's wife, and he couldn't deal with it. And he developed a bad heroin habit over it. Okay. And this went on for a couple of years. He would kind of like go into
Dude,
exile
what was the
over it.
song? He wrote a
Okay.
song about that, right? Later, it's about that,
Layla's
right?
about
That's
her.
the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, Layla. Oh, there's a lot of songs in that period that Clapton wrote that are about her. Okay, and at one point, there's later, a few years later, after that album comes out and everything, I think it's like 72, 73, something like that. Um, there's a party, and I think it's at Harrison's house. And at the beginning of the party, she's with Harrison, and at the end of the party, she's with
Wow.
Clapton. Okay, and the thing is, the amazing thing is that Harrison let it happen, didn't have any hard feelings, would continue to be friends with Clapton, and he used to call him his husband-in-law.
So you mean they did
All
the
right, now
deed, right? Like they bang and everything, right?
well, yeah, I think it was at a party, and their marriage was
Yeah.
on the rocks. Okay,
What's in the Harrison compound? Because they had a lot of rooms to have sex in.
yeah, yeah, no, it was a party at his compound, yeah. Um, and he stayed friends with him,
Wow.
after that, and he would remarry, and they would Clapton would marry her, but I think it only lasted about maybe 10 years, and then they got divorced. But that was a crazy, crazy time, man. You steal a guy's wife,
I
but he
always heard
stays friends
rumors
with
of
you.
that. It was crazy. You want to hear something interesting that George Harrison said in 2000 of December?
What's
That
that?
was the greatest thing about splitting up, to be able to go off and make my own record. I was
Yeah,
also able to record with all these new people, which was like a breath of fresh air. That was George Harrison in 2000. Talk about Like he was bad when the Beatles broke up, and he was able to, do his own shit.
Well, yeah, I mean, they spent about 2 years fighting that band before they broke up. Between '68, the White Album, Abbey Road, and Let It Be. Those three, everything started to fall apart. They would go. They weren't even really a band. They would come together every few months. Okay, they were going separate ways. John Lennon was with Yoko every fucking second of his existence. Okay, you couldn't get him away from her. And then Ringo was just whatever. He'd play with anybody. He didn't care. Ringo was about as easygoing as could be. Paul was hooking up with
Yeah,
Linda Eastman, and then you know, I, the impression I get during that time, and I've read a few things here and there, is that McCartney was getting like really arrogant. Okay. And John was kind of being a douchebag as well. And because these two guys were the main
yeah,
songwriters in the band, now Harrison, who contributed a lot, okay, wanted to contribute more. These guys were fighting with each other, and they were fighting with him, not taking him seriously. Okay. So it was for 2 years, he was suffering. He was in the biggest band
yeah.
that
But they
ever
were
existed.
shitting on each other.
Okay. But they were shitting on each other, and all he wanted to do was make music. He wanted to contribute more, and he wanted to be treated as an equal. He wasn't getting that in the Beatles, so he was playing
You
with
want
other
to hear
people.
something crazy? He didn't
And
realize Phil Collins was in the album until he started when he did the
yeah,
30th anniversary.
yeah, he didn't. He didn't know. He didn't know. Well, there was probably a lot of recording done when he wasn't even there. Okay, there was probably days where he had to go
Oh
visit
yeah,
his
and
sick
then yep,
mother, and Phil Collins wasn't anybody at that point. He was just a known percussionist. Okay. I'm not sure what he plays on the album. I guess it's drums, or it's might be some
yeah,
kind of percussion. That's what he was known for. So it might have been a day when he wasn't even there. You know, Harrison didn't even on his vocals until the end. But
okay,
the overdubbing actually began on August 12th, and the early mixes were sent over to Phil Spector, who actually went back to Los Angeles. So he had
okay,
started mixing stuff in LA, and then Let It Down was one of the songs that was first mixed there, and it received like a big wall of sound production. That probably has the most overdubbing out of all the songs on the album.
wow.
Yeah, now Spector would
Dude, can
then,
you imagine that on fucking Mike back then? They were doing like they were finding a way to put all this sound and stuff and then mix it in and put your voice in it. Think about how incredible that is. And we're talking about the 70s, man.
yeah, I mean, there was no digital. It
Yeah,
was,
that's
it was
crazy.
analog. It was analog. It was all tapes.
And you had to send that shit across. Dude, what if the shit would have got lost or something? You know
Yep,
what? That's it.
yep, yep. I mean, you want to hear a story? Even that happened. That kind of stuff would happen even going into the '80s and '90s. The Ramones made a live album in Spain
Yeah,
in 1991 called Loco Live. Okay, and it was the first live album that they had done in years,
yeah,
and it was the first one with the new bass player CJ was in the band. They recorded the album. I think it was in Barcelona, if I remember right,
yeah.
and the tapes were stolen.
Holy shit.
They had to redo the whole show in the studio. It was faked. That album is fake. Loco Live.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of people don't know that. But they lost the master tapes. The whole thing was lost.
Wow.
Yeah. So that shit would happen even going into the 80s and 90s. And at
Wow.
that point, recording was a little bit easier. You had some digital aspects you could throw in there. But back in the All Things Must Pass, forget it. Everything was taped.
Yeah, tape.
Okay.
Wow.
Now you would have to go from 8-track to 16 tracks for all the extra overdubbing. So Spector would return to England, all right, and he would go to Trident Studios, which is a famous studio. The Stones would record a lot there. A lot of people did, and he oversaw the conversions of the mixes from 8-track to 16-track, and that would add they would be able to add the Wall of Sound to that. Okay. Now, the album's orchestrations and everything, the strings and stuff, were recorded in early September of 70. And then Harrison would add all his vocals, his slide guitars, and his backing vocals at the same time.
Wow.
That was the basically the end of the process. Now, in early October, the final mixes were done at Abbey Road Studios. And on October 28th, Harrison and his wife, Patty, came to New York City, where Harrison and Phil Spector carried out the final preparations, which was basically the sequencing of the songs.
Yeah.
Okay, how they were going to come, what order everything was going to be in, and, fade outs and, things like that. So Harrison, during this period, he was kind of a nervous wreck. All right, because he felt that some of the songs maybe weren't strong enough to be on the album. He was feeling like, and these were songs that he had for a long time.
Yeah.
But he wasn't sure. He wasn't 100% on Phil's production. There's a lot of reverb on that album. And I think it's great because I love like all Phil Spector productions. But even Harrison says, like, I think it was around the time of the remastering that he did in 2000, that he felt there was too much reverb on a lot of things. And I don't agree with him, but it's his album,
Yeah.
But,
and he also remember this is like his first actually like big album.
Yeah. Well, it was his first album, and it ended up being the biggest solo Beatle record ever.
Yep.
Okay, there's some interesting stats with that.
6-time platinum.
Yeah. Now, like I said, he was a nervous wreck, and he had a meeting with Apple Records USA manager, a guy named Alan Steckler. And Steckler, sat him down and reassured him. And he said, listen, every one of these tracks in the final mix are perfect. They're all fit to be released.
They pretty much were perfect when you listen.
They were.
Even now, the order they put them in, like it's like it goes from one to another, and it doesn't even miss a beat. It's like a perfect fucking album almost.
Yeah. I mean, you were dealing with guys in their prime. Okay, Phil Spector and Harrison in their prime. Okay, working together.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one thing that you have to talk about is the actual artwork and the box itself, because it was very unique for the time. There was never a triple record ever in rock and roll.
Yeah, that's like unheard of.
Okay, yeah. And what they did was they created a hinged box. Okay, it opened up. Okay, with a box and a box shape. So the three records would sit on top of each other, and they, the design of that made it kind of like difficult to carry. All right, it wasn't like a gatefold that would open three ways.
Yeah,
it was just a shallow box that would open. It would be kind of hinged on one side, so it would just open. And if you want, if you were carrying a bunch of them, it was difficult. If you were in a store or something, it was hard to carry. A lot of retailers didn't know what to do with it, because at the time, box sets like that were associated with like classical music or opera. All right, so they didn't know what to do with this like rock record that was big and bulky, and but it didn't matter because the album was a hit right off the bat. Okay, the cover of the album was shot at Friar Park. That's Harrison's house.
Yeah,
and he's sitting down on the lawn with 4 garden gnomes lying down around him on the ground. And that's supposed to represent the Beatles.
I saw that. Yeah.
And that he's like, the one standing. Now, John Lennon is on record, like, criticizing that. Like, what the fuck? Okay, like he didn't like that look.
Fuck Lennon.
And he, it turned out that, when it came down to it, he was just jealous, okay, of the success of it. All right, because what he was working on at that time was the Imagine album, and it's nowhere near as good as this one.
That's a shit album.
Well, I hate that song, number one, and then
The Communist Manifesto, huh?
exactly. I mean, Instant Karma is a good song.
Yeah.
All right. But that was the Plastic Ono band. That was a different thing. But that John Lennon Imagine record, I never listened to that album. But it came with a poster, the George Harrison album, okay? And it's like a picture of him in a darkened hallway. The album was released November 27th, 1970, and in the United States, and then it was released November 30th in the UK. My Sweet Lord was the first single.
Great song.
Yeah, that would get to number one in both countries by February of 71. The second single was the song What Is Life?
Yep.
Now, that was also a big hit. The album would be number one in the UK for 8 weeks, and it would be number one in the United States from January to February of 71. Okay, now it's the only solo Beatle record to have a number one single, My Sweet Lord, and album simultaneously.
Wow.
Okay, now, and like we said before, it was 6 times platinum. Okay,
I got another few stacks. So in the New York Times 100 greatest album that people must have, greatest album of all time, guess who they ranked this album?
Oh, it's got to be in the top 30.
No, it's not even the top 30.
What is it?
It was 79 in the top 100 greatest. So, and it's even.
I don't agree with that.
And then with the Rolling Stone, it's even worse. The Rolling Stone 500 album, 500 the greatest album of all time. It was 433.
Nah, I'd put it a lot higher than that. I think this album, the problem with it probably is that it's long.
That's what it is. It's a long album.
Right. But people will sit there and listen to fucking Pink Floyd records that are long.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or the Allman Brothers.
Or Allman Brothers. They'll put that shit higher. I don't know why. Okay. Because I'll be honest with you, I'd rather listen to George Harrison, All Things Must Pass, than like almost anything by Pink Floyd. Okay. You know what I mean? I'm not, there's people out there that just continuously kiss the ass of that band. Okay. And I just think their day is long over. I mean, it's an album that it's different than what the Beatles were doing at the time.
Yeah.
It's heavy. It's heavier. It's heavy. It's heavier than anything the Beatles did solo.
Yeah.
The guitar work on that's amazing.
Oh.
And it's not flashy. It's not like he's being Jimi Hendrix. This is just like heavy guitar chords.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay. I've even learned to like the Apple Jam. And I some people always say, well, I don't listen to that part of the album. Okay. I get it. There's no words. Okay. And there's, it's
but the instrumental is amazing.
11-minute jams. But
it's amazing.
You listen to some of them. Yeah. It's like kind of cool. Like Out of the Blue is a great song. I think it's the best solo effort by any Beatle. Okay. Paul McCartney had a couple of okay songs with Wings and stuff, but they were never consistent. This album is consistent all the way through. And then Harrison, of course, would make a lot of albums after that, and he would never peak like with this.
No, I think this was the best album that he took out.
It was the masterpiece.
You want to hear another great thing about this album? In 2014, it was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame.
The Grammy Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. All right. I don't think it won a Grammy.
No, but it was inducted to the Grammy Hall of Fame, the album.
What year was that?
In 2014.
Oh, okay. So Harrison had been dead a while already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be more like a, like a Lifetime Achievement Award or something.
Lifetime kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Or they were just, pretty much celebrating the greatness of the album, Probably a lot of people heard it then and they were like, okay, because it must have been easier to pick up once you put that shit on CD. You don't have to carry this giant box.
Yeah, wow. So that's what I got for you today. I just want to remind everybody what we got coming up next. That's going to be a rock show podcast on T-Rex.
T-Rex should be interesting. There's a lot of history
Yeah.
about T-Rex.
Yep, we might have a special guest for that show. Did I tell you?
No, you gotta let me know. So I'll need the person's number so I can tune them in.
I'll let you know. And it should be good. We'll probably get that in maybe over the weekend.
Sounds good. And we also got the interview coming up, right? Tomorrow?
Right. We got the interview with Joey Pinter.
Joey Pinter,
okay.
right?
And I'm hoping you kind of put that up early. All right. We might get that one up in April.
The Joey Pinter one, I might put up right away.
Yeah, I think you should. So this one,
that's gonna be more a Rocker Mike and Rob Presents.
Yes, exactly.
So that could be up. I'll either put it up right after the interview. I'll put it up on Tuesday.
Okay, well, doesn't matter because by the time people hear this, it would have happened.
All right.
So but all right. So Rob, that's great, man. Good talking to
you.
Glad you're all right up there.
Yeah. So far, everything's so good. And remember, don't get drunk.
Get drunk.
Get lumped up.
Lumped up. Take care, people.